Thank you very much. My first disclosure is that I work for Homeland Security, but I'm not representing Homeland Security. Homeland Security has nothing to do with cardiac arrest at this point that I can report. I'm a former paramedic, and for a long time I was a reporter for USA Today, and had the great privilege to cover this for USA Today a while back. So while I do, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's humbling to be in a room with most of my heroes. Spending time working on this has been a wonderful experience for me. My day job, it does include strategic communications and incident communications, so it is relevant. My day job is relevant, but I don't represent the department. Do I do this? Next slide. Does that work? As I said, in 2003, the series was called 6 Minutes to Live. It was a result of an 18-month investigation where I found geographic disparities in survival across the nation in sudden cardiac arrest. The best performing cities held themselves accountable. That is the one key finding from that. It was an honor to spend time in these cities and see firsthand what some of these root causes were that made such a dramatic difference. One of them is the cities that did the best measured true response times. I heard response times come up a minute ago. If I drop right now, the clock starts, and the clock should not stop until the 911 rescuer is at my side. And that is not being measured by cities right now. Most cities, other than the high-performing cities, Utstein measures this, the CARES measures this, the high-performing cities measure true response times. They also measure true survival. So they don't measure return of spontaneous circulation at the hospital. They measure walk and talk, and the survivors you just saw. Those are survivors. So the problem, as many of you know, is that a lot of these cities are lying to themselves. Not only are they not telling the public what they're doing, but they're lying to themselves about their benchmarks. And so these measures that we've been talking about allow them to dig deep and look in the mirror and decide what they really need to do to save more lives. The series allowed me to show readers really for the first time what they could do in the case of a sudden cardiac arrest. We did a graphic, which back then in 2003 was pretty novel for newspapers online. Right now it's very common, but showed people how to do CPR and use an AED and ask them to read the graphic and have the courage to do it with or without training. Obviously, we encourage training, but the point was if you have two hands and you can find an AED, you're probably going to be able to figure it out. I won a few awards for the series. My most cherished award was for saving Connie Lane in 1989. After I was a paramedic, I was a cub reporter, and I was sitting outside of a bank when dispatch toned out CPR in progress right next door to me, and I was on my way to a man with a gun to see if that was really a story or just a guy who was coming back from hunting. And so I decided I would go inside and ended up doing good CPR, if I must say so myself, on Connie until the engine arrived, and for the first time in Fort Collins, Colorado, applied their AED with my help and my encouragement, because I was in a big hurry to get the AED on her because she kept opening her eyes after a few rounds of compressions. And that, to be, as many of you in this room know, to be able to do that to a stranger and have that experience is a wonderful experience to have, rare indeed. We've all been touched, as we've learned, by cardiac arrest. A friend of mine, David Frost, collapsed in Seattle years ago. Another friend of mine, my deputy and good friend, collapsed here locally. More on them in a minute. But the main thing about messaging in cardiac arrest is this is really a unique emergency. It's not a heart attack. We need to correct that. Anyone who talks to the media, anyone who hears someone describe a heart attack on the news should pick up the phone and call them and say, give a gentle correction and say, next time you have an opportunity to report this, please call it a sudden cardiac arrest. I've seen many news agencies starting to report this, and I think they're open to the distinction, and that would be a good entree to talk to them. I don't think they would mind it at all, and I think it's very important. As we know, SCA is often easily reversible by bystanders. As a former paramedic, the worst thing in the world was rolling up on a cardiac arrest call and seeing people with their hands in their pocket. That was not going to be a good experience, no matter what. Never was. These life-saving acts are easy, but they must begin immediately. That first shock in 6 minutes really came from the research at the time, and thanks to Roger White and others for helping me with this series. If you can shock within 6 minutes, you're good. And if you get good CPR, you can stretch that time. But it's just a stretch. Obviously, as we know, everyone can learn to recognize sudden cardiac arrest and be ready to save a life. That's what we need to focus on with our messaging. And yet still thousands of lives are needlessly lost every year due to inaction. And as we have our conversations here at the 30,000-foot view and all the different approaches that we take to this, I think the bottom line that we all need to think about is, it was mentioned before, if we're going to declare war on this, those are the victims of our war. Those people, it's the people who are savable. And there are many who aren't, but many, many are. Thousands are. And that's who we need to focus on in our war. Outreach, a lot of times people think outreach is media, and that could really, that doesn't pass the test today. Media is very different than it was when I was in it. I left in 2008. And it is continuing to change in dramatic ways. Potentially good ways with social media, but it's not the same thing. It used to be that we could summon medical reporters. One of you could call a press conference, or you could gather reporters in your town, and you could have medical reporters come and give them the studies and have intelligent conversations and have really good medical coverage. I bet there aren't many of you who have that luxury these days. The media is strained. And the stories are segmented. It's not the same media. So key messages are easily lost and diluted today. Mass media is still the key to reaching millions of people, but mass media is a heavy lift. It's something that stories like this, we can do it, but it either takes a lot of money or a lot of time. We can talk a little bit more about that. Social media is the key to reaching the younger audiences, and it is a on-ramp to multimedia. So, an eighth grader who's doing really great impressions of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton can end up on The Tonight Show a week later because they go viral on YouTube. That's really what we need here. Is we need both multimedia, social media, viral messages in our war. This is, I was asked what public health parallels exist with cardiac arrest. They really don't. This isn't the same thing as drink and drive or wear a seatbelt or get vaccinated. In those situations, we're scaring people into change. We're saying if you don't buckle up, you're going to die. If you don't stop smoking, you're going to die. If you don't get a mammogram, you're going to die. That's not what we're doing here. This is not, the victim of cardiac arrest is really not our audience. Our audience here is really the bystander. This is really motivating people to overcome their fear to act. It's the person, we were at dinner last night, and a couple of doctors were talking about their research and animated conversation, and the table nearby said, "We heard you talking about CPR. What are you guys talking about?" And this lawyer and this CBS radio producer engaged in a conversation with us, and I asked them, "Well, are you ready to do CPR if somebody collapses?" And the lawyer said, "Yes, she would." And the guy, the CBS producer, said, "I've had taken CPR classes. I really don't think I could do it." That's what we're going for right there. That fear to just, and he said something about lifting the chin and the breaths, and I don't know, it's all complicated. Well, haven't you heard it's just compressions only? No, haven't heard that. So I think that's the focus of our audience right there. Convincing people that they can do something if a loved one drops or even a stranger drops in front of them. We need to focus on what they need to do, but we really need to focus on letting them know that they can do it. So how do we do that? It's really about partnerships. You know, messaging has been on everyone's list so far, even when we're talking about research. You always come back to how do we talk to the public, how do we engage the public. Right now, we really need to synchronize. So I hear a lot of different opinions, which is why we're here, to share different opinions. But I think we really need to come together on some simple messages that are bottom line messages, and everybody in this space needs to be on the same page. Time to stop. Last thing, the other part that I want to mention about public awareness is holding people accountable. It is absolutely that the public understand that they can demand good performance from these systems. By spending time in systems that do well and spending time in systems that don't do well, there's absolutely no reason that systems can't do better than they're doing. I mentioned that my friend David collapsed in Seattle, 15 minutes of CPR before an AED, cooling. He returned to his job as a aeronautical engineer at Boeing. My friend Larry, who collapsed here, immediate CPR, AED, and we buried him at Arlington National Cemetery last week. So we know that the systems are different, and some people can and can't be saved. But I think that engaging the public and getting them, as this says, as our charge is, to create an environment of action is doable. Thank you.